We're entering into a particularly interesting time when it comes to Fallout 76, in that we don't really know a ton about the future of the game. So in this video, I want to go over a bit as to when we might hear more about the Brotherhood of Steel, and even further, what we may learn about the Brotherhood of Steel, adding in some of the additional context we now have as far as the faction itself goes. Even further, I want to talk more about the recent ban and now maybe unban wave that has begun with the game due to recent dupes. Fallout First has gotten some more changes that seem to indicate that Bethesda was listening, and even further, the Battle Pass is seeing some updates going forward that also seem to represent more listening from Bethesda. But then lastly, we have what is actually a very large exploit to recently pop up with the game, so I do want to discuss a bit about that and the potential impact it could have. If you guys enjoy the content, you can leave a like or get subscribed. I should have several more Fallout 76 videos over the next couple of weeks, as again, I think we may have more on the horizon around this game. But starting things off, let's look again at this ban wave that we recently have seen with the game, and now how some unbans may be going out. Just recently, there was a dupe in Fallout 76 involving vendors. It is very easy to do, applicable on all three systems, and shortly after the dupe became fairly widespread, bans started going out for those abusing it. Technically, those initial emails were just suspensions, mentioning how there's an investigation beginning and that account was suspended at that point. So then at that point, many users had the opportunity to actually submit appeals, try and argue why they shouldn't be banned, or even why their temporary suspension should not convert into a permanent ban. And we've seen actually several of these start getting denied by Bethesda, wherein they've been saying after review of the account, it has been determined that the account did in fact violate our terms of service. We regret to inform you that your appeal for temporary account suspension reversal is denied due to the evidence within our system for exploitation item duplication. So an interesting point around this, although this has been fairly widespread, we've seen many people get these over the past few days, it doesn't inherently mean these are all converting to permabans. It really just seems to imply that you aren't getting an answer right now and you aren't getting unbanned right now, as it seems like what's happening with the suspension wave is many of these people are just kind of suspended. Some users have gotten permanent ban emails where they just completely lost access to that account because they were egregiously duping, but a lot of people are sitting in the dark. They haven't gotten an email one way or the other. This could mean that if you have yet to get an email, you may just have a temporary suspension and will be unbanned. But what I think is more likely is Bethesda's working through the information and isn't necessarily sure yet where some of these accounts will fall. Although one email that has been floating around that is pretty interesting is this one, as it is a hypothetical unsuspension email, wherein Bethesda state, after a thorough review of your account, we are pleased to inform that we will be reinstating your access to Fallout 76 online services. Unfortunately, any items in your inventory that we have deemed to be obtained illegitimately have been removed and your account level has been reset. Any further violations of our TOS agreement and code of conduct will result in the immediate and irreversible ban of this account. So this is an interesting one. It actually would be kind of huge by Bethesda, as it does seem to suggest not only were duped items removed, but also the account level overall was reset to 0 or technically level 1. There's been a lot of back and forth on this email because although at first glance it seems 100% legit and actually comes from a known duper community on Facebook, it is the only instance of someone receiving this email. Thus far, it's really the only time I could see anyone getting unbanned or their suspension lifted. Until we have further confirmation or we see more emails like this going out, I would take it with a grain of salt, but if this is the case, that's actually a pretty interesting outcome. In the past, Bethesda has done something similar to this, wherein they just remove all of the duped items, or sometimes don't even remove all of the duped items, but having your level reset in this game does kind of suck. It would be really annoying and definitely a good deterrent to not dupe again in the future. I think overall, just doing a full-on account reset could have just been a better solution here, wipe the characters overall, but having your level reset alone would probably be infuriating in Fallout 76. Because you can't use any of your weapons or armor because likely they're all level 45 or 50, but even further, it's not like you could easily gain experience by doing some of those early game quests. You can't just go to the Wayward and get a few levels through that quest line, then some of the other ones. That is assuming that person already beat them, but it would actually be way more difficult to level up if your level was reset. So if real, this is definitely an interesting take by Bethesda, and I'm curious to see if we find out more about this in the future, if more of these exact same emails start going out. Another pretty interesting thing we saw is more changes around Fallout First. A couple of months ago, there was kind of a large community push against Fallout First, where several people were pretty unhappy with the service or some of the offerings from it. in that there really weren't a ton of new additions to it, and even further, it seemed like some of the promised features weren't really coming out, like the exclusive discounts that were supposed to be for first members. It turns out apparently exclusive discounts were a thing, they just weren't labeled anywhere, so you didn't really realize it was a thing. You would just see an additional discount. But since then, as we just talked about recently, we've actually seen several new additions to the service. Some new armor skins, some new actual armors that are pretty cool, and data mines tell us there are going to be several additional exclusive items on the horizon. Although, one thing Bethesda just recently did was actually explicitly label a Fallout First discount. They have a weekly article where they show off what new items are on the Atomic Shop, and on the Atomic Shop you could find a new cement tire wall discount that is exclusive to Fallout First. Unfortunately, it doesn't really seem to indicate in-game that this is obviously a Fallout First discount, but if you do read the Atomic Shop post on a weekly basis, it is very clear there, and definitely props to Bethesda. Although Fallout First will likely always, and definitely still is, a controversial aspect of the game, since a lot of that backlash did come out, they definitely have been doing a better job with the service overall. Although we still have yet to see any additional functionality on private servers, which is definitely something else I know a lot of us want, and was mentioned in some of those original posts as a prospective feature in the future. But we also saw some changes around the Battle Pass or season system in Fallout 76. There was an issue over the past couple of weeks, one with challenges auto-completing. It seems like that has basically been fixed in the game now though. Although actually as I was filming this video, there are some reports of challenges still auto-completing. Bethesda responded to some of these, just mentioning how it seems like more of a niche or specific problem, so perhaps the problem isn't fixed in its entirety, but they are aware of it and still working to fix it holistically. But even further in that, there was actually only 8 challenges during a day where there were supposed to be 9. Well, Bethesda has responded to this in a fairly large way in that they are making the 9 daily challenge aspect of this permanent. They originally mentioned how they would add some extra ones in the future, and then until July 20th, there would be 9 daily challenges instead of the typical 7. But just earlier today, the official Fallout account tweeted, "The evil Dr. Zerbo is racing to the finish line, catch up with 2 bonus daily challenges in Fallout 76 each day until the legendary run ends in September." It's another win from Bethesda. It'll now be a permanent edition, and what this means is it's a lot easier to complete the challenges overall. You'll just naturally be gaining more experience, and due to recent data mines, we also know there might be a new event repeatable also added, so it definitely seems like they were listening to some of that feedback that this overall might be a bit too difficult. Although definitely not for everybody, as many people have been flying through this challenge system just by logging in each day. And of course now you are able to buy your way through, which was also met with some pushback kind of. If you go to purchase a rank on the Battle Pass, it'll show you not only the Battle Pass icon, but also all of the final items, which is kind of misleading. It almost makes it seem like you'll be able to buy all of those items that are pictured there, but in reality, all of those other images, the ones I'm highlighting here, are just if you get to rank 100, that's what you'll get. So although by buying a rank you'll be one step closer, you're not actually getting any of that stuff. I don't think it's a huge issue for people who were informed, but if you don't really know what's going on or you weren't paying attention, it definitely could be misleading. I wouldn't say it's a huge controversy, more of just a mistake from Bethesda, but I definitely saw some people upset about this. Something else that just recently got added to the game that is kind of big is on the Atomic Shop with the Raider Collectron. The Raider Collectron is an interesting one in that it is a Collectron that can get you both aid items as well as alcohol, which I would say probably makes it one of the best Collectron options out there. Of course, that's going to vary depending on your playstyle, but for me at least, aid items that it gives you as well as alcohol is actually really valuable. Now, of course, there are some debates about the pay-to-win aspect of this. At this point, I feel like we're just too far gone for that. A year ago, this might have been a bigger issue, but now the bar has simply moved. There are just more pay-to-advantage or pay-to-win items in Fallout 76, and something like this isn't nearly as bad given the current context. And also, it is important to note, you collect these at such a slow rate that if you were actively playing the game, you would definitely get more of them with relative ease. It's not like alcohol or chems are particularly hard to come by. Although something else that's pretty interesting to just recently pop up is a pretty bad new exploit in Fallout 76. This is an interesting exploit as it uses one of the functionality that was also used for the recent dupe exploit. Although they're kind of different in many ways, it just happens to be using one of the same methods. But in effect, the way this exploit works is you can repeatedly complete the daily quest for the settlers. And when I say repeatedly, you could just keep turning it in over and over and in turn keep getting the rewards. over and over, which means you can get hypothetically unlimited caps, unlimited experience, unlimited treasury notes, and even unlimited script, which is just directly added to your character so you can bypass some of those limits on script. Then of course the actual settler reputation that you would always get by completing the quest. It is important to note that although this is unlimited hypothetically, it is somewhat timely. You're going to spend a lot of time connecting to servers and kind of moving around. It's definitely faster than playing naturally, a lot faster than playing naturally, but it's not like after 10 minutes you're going to max out everything. And overall, it's going to be interesting to see how Bethesda responds to this one, because it is a particularly bad exploit, but it's unique in that it's not really harming anybody else. It is only somewhat harming Bethesda. In the past, I feel like they've been somewhat reluctant with handing out bans around these unless you really abused a certain exploit. Like when people were getting max gold bullions right off the bat and just buying everything, Bethesda took notice and banned those accounts. But for some of the other exploits, the bans have been kind of hit or miss, so I wonder if they'll have a big response to this one also, just like they had with the dupe wave. I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people are wary about completing this because of the dupe wave, and for all of these bonuses, it's not like you can trade them off to another account. If you abuse this exploit, all you're doing is getting that current account to max level, which of course outside of the caps, if it's just banning that account, you're really not gaining much from this. There's not much tradable items. So the saga of exploits and Fallout 76 definitely does continue, and it'll be interesting to see where things go with this one. Another interesting exploit of sorts that used to exist, or kind of still does exist in the game, were stacking punji boards. This was a camp trap item, and basically if you walk over it, it deals damage. But people were able to stack them to great degrees, and then if you're shopping in somebody's camp, they would place it under you and it would insta-kill you, dealing a ton of damage in a moment. In the recent update, Bethesda removed the ability to stack these, which is a good update. Except they didn't actually delete the schematics people had at their camp with these already made. So if somebody had created this or was already abusing this, hypothetically they still can. It's not really like anything had changed for them. They can't create new ones, but if they have their existing one and they just keep storing it over and over again and don't accidentally delete it, nothing is really different here. So it is definitely still something to be wary of, and I've actually seen reports of some users not even going to people's camps if they have junk on them anymore. But then we do have the question of future content, and this part of the video is going to be somewhat more speculative. One thing that's pretty interesting is we almost know the Brotherhood of Steel content batch is coming in 3 waves of sorts. We know in just a few weeks we're getting the Atlas Observatory based community event that will be in 2 separate phases. What exactly we're doing during this isn't totally clear, but seemingly donating resources to Atlas to build it back up, which we saw in the trailer. The second phase likely having something to do with Maxon's coded messages. They were actually encrypted, like you had to use certain decryption methods and things like ciphers and spectrograms to actually find out what they meant. You could click in the eye if you want to check out that video. But then of course Steel Dawn and the much larger Fractured Steel coming down the line. But before we jump into that, we also do have the question of when exactly this is coming, because we do have several interesting dates coming up. If you're watching this video just as it goes live, in 2 days we do have the Xbox Showcase event. Although Bethesda tends to be at these Xbox Showcase events, I almost feel like a Fallout 76 DLC trailer isn't really meant for that. It's about new games, next generation games in particular. A DLC for Fallout 76 isn't really that exciting in that particular context, unless there's some secret or hidden HD overhaul around the corner for next-gen systems. I can't imagine this DLC trailer will be there. Although I do suspect Bethesda themselves may be there in some capacity, or at least I have a hunch. Separately, we have QuakeCon, and I think QuakeCon is the most likely point where we actually get further details around Fallout 76's future, both in interviews. They typically do a Q&A, they have at least for the past 2 years, and even further, something much more meaty like a proper Wastelanders trailer. Except this time it'll be for the Fractured Steel, and perhaps give us an insight as to what exactly this next batch of content is. There's also Gamescom, but Bethesda doesn't tend to reveal major things at Gamescom, so I wouldn't expect a ton outside of repeat trailers or new gameplay for Deathloop, since that is coming out later this year. But we are entering into an interesting phase with Fallout 76, as our knowledge about this current content is coming to an end. This tends to happen as Bethesda almost goes through patches in waves, so when they uploaded the PTS or even the live servers, we kind of got a bunch of data mined information about the next couple of months of content. But now we're running to the end of that information. information, and with recent PTS updates, there aren't new additions, likely because internally, Bethesda is working on a separate build of the game. Although, once we get the next PTS update, once patch 22 begins testing on the PTS, which is probably only in a month or so, we will get another massive information dump and likely an insight as to what all of this future content will be. We know thus far things like daily ops are on the way. We'll probably hear a lot more about that. They'll seemingly be a rotating dungeon of sorts, so I kind of imagine like another take on the Vault 94 instancing technology. We've also seen changes and actually some armors for Vault 96, so I would expect that at some point this year, yet it doesn't really fit anywhere in on the roadmap. Perhaps Vault 96 releases as a part of daily ops and is just kind of integrated into that dungeon system. You'll occasionally have a rotating dungeon at Vault 96, and maybe even Vault 94 reopens, but now there'll be a plethora of dungeons, so things are a lot fresher. It's not the consistent grind at that one location. We have the bomb drops event, which I think that could just be periodic nukes. It doesn't seem very glamorous, but it's something they just tried out on the PTS recently with a colossal problem, where basically on a set timer a nuke would drop on a certain location, and I wouldn't be shocked if this event does something similar. I know though that's kind of mundane at first glance. An easy way to spice that up is just add in a new boss level enemy at one certain location, but let's say every 2 hours you get a bomb that drops either at the Scorch Beast Queen, at the Wendigo Colossus, specifically the location of a colossal problem, and then maybe a third one that is a totally new boss. That could be a pretty fun limited time event and spice up something like a new boss level enemy addition to the game. We could also see expeditions on the roadmap, which definitely seems like something that will take us outside of Appalachia. Expeditions, just in their naming, do kind of inherently involve going to new places. And as I've mentioned in the past, I really expect it'll be very similar to the Fallout 3 Creation Club item, which was a Fallout 4 mini DLC taking us back to the GNR building from Fallout 3. Right around Appalachia are a lot of familiar places, and little snippets of them as a small DLC could be a really cool event from Bethesda, or just an overall feature that they add to over time. Basically just being an event or an outdoor dungeon that you can go to periodically. But then also we have some big questions around the Brotherhood of Steel. What exactly are they doing in Appalachia? Why are they returning after all of this time? And even further, why do they begin to hate each other? Or at least that's what's implied or thought of from the Fractured Steel DLC naming. Also, something I feel like just about everyone has forgotten about, but still was a recent new addition to the game. What about the guide stones? They were just placed down in the world. We got a lot of mystery with the Wastelanders update and decoding the guide stones for one. But secondly, for actually finding things like the mini interloper. Is this something Bethesda will play up at all? Will there be a larger alien DLC at some point, or maybe just some more alien involvement in the world? Or is this all just some tertiary background mystery that Bethesda is kind of poking at from time to time, but never will really lead anywhere? Or even are somehow the Brotherhood of Steel and the aliens connected? Is that Fractured Steel overall? The Brotherhood clearly have a big interest in technology, and aliens in general tend to be technologically advanced, especially the ones we saw in Fallout 3. Overall, there's a lot of interesting things on the way to this game, but what gets me excited is how we really don't know much about a lot of this. We have rough ideas about how some of this may work or conceptually will work, but I think over the next month or so, we're going to start to get answers to those questions, whether it be through a new trailer or even from data mines in the patch 22 PTS, which again is probably not that far away now. Either way, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. Hopefully you guys found this video informative as always. I'm definitely going to have full coverage on whatever we find out from QuakeCon and even sooner from the Xbox event. But until next time, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.